Today on Joe's Geek Show, we're going to be talking about Halloween Ends. What's going on, and welcome to Joe's Geek Show, the video series where we talk comics and occasionally movies, which is definitely the subject of, well, today's video. Again, Halloween Ends. So Halloween Ends is a 2022 film, which is the third and final part in the most recent Halloween trilogy. It stars Jamie Lee Curtis, Andy Matchett, Rowan Campbell, and is directed by David Gordon Green. And before we get into the main video, I just want to let you know that we are going to be very heavy on the spoilers. Because as I sat down thinking about making this video and whatnot, I kept thinking to myself, how could I do this in a non-spoiler fashion? It got to a point where I realized that I couldn't. So I decided, let's just go for it. I'm gonna lay it all out for you. So this movie starts off not with Michael Myers, but with a babysitter by the name of Corey, who is hired to watch this kid while his parents go out and party on Halloween. And let's just say things go sour, like real fast. Effectively, the kid dies. Albeit, as we see it, it was an accident. Nonetheless, the effects of a child dying under an adult supervisor has really negative consequences on Corey's life, as he's labeled a child murderer, and it pretty much just ruins his life. So then we get our traditional Halloween credits, and then time skip. It's now 4 years later, and I sat there and I thought to myself, we're doing time skips, because I mean, originally, as far as like the first two movies in this trilogy went, I thought that, you know, this was going to be one sweeping narrative over the course of three movies, like just on Halloween night, like that particular Halloween night. But instead, we do a time skip, and it's, I guess, to show, you know, just the effects that Michael Myers' rampage has had on Haddonfield, as, you know, there's a lot of, you know, distrust around the community and people dying, and people really don't like, you know, Laurie. Some even blame her for what happened because it was like, you provoked the devil, and, you know, you poked the bear and all that jazz. So it's kind of, we're just blaming everything on you. But that's okay, because Laurie is almost a completely different character than she was in the other two movies. Whereas in the other two movies, you know, she was very disheveled and, you know, hardened and stuff. She was preparing for that night Michael Myers would return. And after that monster had murdered her daughter's husband, and a slew of other people, she went to therapy, I guess, and, you know, wrote a book, which is very cathartic, I'm sure, and now just a very happy-go-lucky person, and just, you know, wants her granddaughter to enjoy Halloween and occasionally get laid. And it was at this point in the movie where I thought to myself, you know, I love Jamie Lee Curtis, I love her portrayal of Laurie Strode, particularly in the other two movies, and I would like her character if I'd gotten to, you know, sort of see this transformation, like maybe getting to sit in some of her therapy sessions or whatnot, and, you know, kind of just witness her road to recovery, rather than her just being, all right, cool, everything's fine now, even though Michael Myers was never caught, but she doesn't live in fear. And once again, enter the character of Corey, who nothing again just went right for this guy after what happened during his babysitting job. And, you know, he's working at a garage with his dad, and, you know, I mean, got a cool bike and stuff, but for the most part, everybody hates him. I mean, that whole incident happened when he was 21, it's been 4 years, so now he's 25, and he's, you know, being bullied by high schoolers, which made me ask another question. If those students were convinced that he truly killed a child, then why would you mess with someone you believe to be a psychopath? But Laurie sees the whole incident, and she decides, you know what? This guy, I know his story. Potentially murdered a child. Think I'm gonna take him and introduce him to my granddaughter. Think they'd be perfect together. And, you immediately I was just in a mode of disconnect, and I'm thinking to myself, what? Because I mean, I get that Laurie wants her daughter to have, more of a social life than she does, but is this really the best way? I mean, are you so sure of this kid's innocence? But nonetheless, she still manages to get Corey in front of Allison, and the two hit it off immediately. I mean, it's crazy how fast these two just like paired up. I mean, one scene later, and she's already basically saying, rip my clothes off, take me here. And if you have not actually watched this movie and you don't care that I'm spoiling the whole thing, I'm sure you're wondering, wait, where is Michael Myers in this Halloween movie? And that's pretty much one of the bigger aspects about this movie. He's not really in it all that much. The primary focus and story is on Allison and Corey's relationship and how Laurie comes to deal with that as the situation devolves into horror. Because as the movie progresses and Allison and Corey get closer together, Corey starts exhibiting some very odd behavior, like staring into Laurie's house just barely next to the bush in a very similar way to Michael Myers himself. He goes from being shy and timid to exuberating, this confidence and, almost like, don't push me around because if you knock me down, I get up, I'm just gonna kill you. And most of that happens after we get one of the few sequences that we actually have with Michael Myers, in that it's after a second encounter with Corey and the bullies that Corey gets completely knocked out, falls over a bridge, he's just out cold, and Michael Myers, I guess, drags him into his little sewer home where he's been for the last 4 years. And when Corey wakes up and confronts Michael Myers, Michael touches him, and there's this very weird moment where it's like Michael just touches him and reads his mind or something, and just like gets the kid's almost entire life story, or at least primarily what had happened to him, 4 years earlier with the kid. And so it seems like because Michael had this vision that, oh, there's now some kinship here, is now Corey has, the very similar eyes as Michael, the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. And so there's a very weird situation, so Corey just tries to get the heck out of Dodge as fast as humanly possible, at which point he comes across this homeless man who also lives under a bridge, who knows that Michael Myers has been living there this entire time, and he wants Corey to go back in, pulls out a knife, and there's a struggle, and you can pretty much guess what happens here. Corey ends up killing him. So now we've had one instance of Corey accidentally killing someone. Now we've had another incident of Corey accidentally killing someone. And it's like, wow, this dude's probably got the worst luck in all of Haddonfield. But hey, let's get back to that love story, shall we? And that pretty much continues it the way you would expect, where Corey gets weirder and weirder through the relationship, and Allison's just like, oh my god, it's so dreamy. Oh my gosh, this Prince Charming, and like even admits that he killed someone to her, and she's just like, yeah, I don't know, I don't care about that. That's great, man. Are we really taking a page out of, Attack of the Clones right now? You know what I mean. The scene where Anakin Skywalker admits he murdered a bunch of Tusken Raiders, and Padme's like, hey, you're humans, you're angry. I get it. Let's get married by the end of this flick, though. And then it basically all culminates in this scene at a restaurant where Allison's basically being harassed by this police officer who, I don't know, it kind of sounds like they may have gone on at least one date and he just didn't want it to end there, or he's just being really pushy or whatever. But anyway, Corey stands up, gets in his face, and then tells Allison, yeah, we're just gonna burn it all down. You want to do that? And she's like, yeah, let's burn it all down. And then the two separate, and Corey manages to get the cop to follow him back to the lair of one Michael Myers. And Michael Myers gets to stab somebody for, the first time in 4 years. And I don't know, but I think Michael Myers may have blown his load. Like when he gets that initial stab, he kind of starts acting sort of like weird, like his body starts shaking, and it's like, okay, maybe he's regaining whatever supernatural power he has, or that stab was maybe just a little too exciting. But now Corey is a full accessory to murder and is now the new protege of Michael Myers. So then we go back to the love story for just a little bit, and it's still not convincing. It does not grow on me like at all. And of course, there's the scene where he goes over to Alice's place. She takes him upstairs because adults are gonna adult, I guess, and it's. Even though he's given so many warning signs to like back off lady, but that doesn't happen. And of course the purpose of this was for him to get access to this clown mask that he wore a few scenes prior at a party. And the next time we see that mask is at the house of Allison's boss, the doc, along with Allison's coworker, who was recently promoted to like the head nurse position, even though Alice was more qualified for it. But anyway, Corey's there too in that clown mask, and he takes a corkscrew and he's just jamming it into the doctor's neck. Makes the nurse freak out. She runs into the house, is trying to call 911, and yep, Michael Myers is there too. And he does the good old classic, just pin her against the wall with a butcher knife. And it's one of those kills that doesn't make much sense when you think about it, with body weight and gravity and whatnot. It still looks really cool. So yeah, now they're a tag team, a dynamic duo of insanity. And now the movie marches on. Laurie's becoming even more increasingly suspicious of Corey. Eventually, Corey's own mom, who's definitely a weird person, as she at one point is yelling at her son, then smacks him, then tries to make out with him. But either way, Corey, he leaves the house. He's like, okay, I can't live there anymore. And he ends up sleeping inside of the, abandoned house where he accidentally killed that kid at the beginning of the movie. And when he wakes up, Laurie's there. And by this point, she's pretty much convinced, all right, this kid's psychotic. He cannot be with Allison. And so she tells him that, which prompts a very crazy smile as he lets his colors shine through and his darkness just wears it on his sleeve. And he turns around for a bit, turns back, and Laurie's gone. And then I guess you're left to wonder, did she just run out the door real fast while he was chilling on the stairs with his head turned, or was she even there at all? I don't know. This movie's gonna do a lot of weird things, and you're never really gonna get answers to any questions. But that was it. Corey has officially snapped, and he decides he no longer wants to be at first the protege or the sidekick. He must become Michael Myers. So he goes back to Michael Myers' lair, tackles him to the ground into submission, and steals his mask. And then, albeit there are some, pretty cool kills in this movie, I will say. The DJ was definitely one of, the more standout ones, where Corey as Michael, and it's only really because he's in the jumpsuit with the mask that it works, I guess, on any kind of level, because you can at least pretend it's Michael doing the killing for a little bit. But he just smashes the dude's head on like his table like over and over and over until his jaw's just like completely ripped open, and he cuts his tongue off and it lands on the record player. It's like, and then the record starts skipping because it's hitting the tongue. Okay, that put a smile on my face. I'm like, all right, we'll give that a pass. And finally seeing those jerk high school kids get their comeuppance. And that is definitely one thing I will say, is at least up until a certain point, like, minus the accident with the kid and the homeless man. And even you could even kind of argue the homeless man was self-defense. He was killing a bunch of jerks, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the story behind it. Doesn't give you the right to be a serial killer. But eventually, he knows he has to go after Laurie Strode because she wants to keep him and Allison apart. And then in a very interesting scene, Laurie picks up her phone, calls into the police about a suicide at her address, picks up a gun, and we hear a bang. Corey, of course, is in the house at this point, so he rolls in, expecting her to have potentially blown her brains out, but haha, it was a trick all along. And Laurie then points the gun and unloads a few shots into his chest, at which point he falls over the banister and lands on the floor. And I guess Michael Myers also potentially taught him how to shrug off, death. Yeah, he's alive, survived all that, but he is hurt. He is definitely hurt and maybe dying, I don't know. But Laurie basically says that you weren't gonna get me, and soon Allison is going to see you for the monster you really are. Because of that suicide call specifically, Officer Hawkins ends up putting a call into Allison to say, hey, we got a call from your grandma's house about a suicide, which prompted Allison to return to the house. However, Corey had a bit of a plan B, where he said that if he can't have Allison, then nobody can. And one would think that would be him either killing Allison or Laurie or whatever. But instead, he just stabs himself in the neck. And Laurie rolls in and pulls out the knife, so when Allison walks in, she sees her grandma standing over Corey's body with a bloody knife. And she thinks, my grandma killed my boyfriend. This is horrible, So Allison leaves again in a fit of anger and rage. But then the real Michael Myers shows up, gets his mask back, and now we have the fight that we saw in the trailer. And it's Michael and Laurie just going at it head to head. And you do get some very interesting moments in this scene. Like there's Laurie who walks swiftly, almost like against sound, and Michael turns his head and doesn't see anything. Something like what Michael himself does. And then we get a knitting needle, which this time Michael manages to jam into her ear, but ultimately Laurie gets the upper hand, just completely pins him down with knives in his hands, and puts the just pushes the fridge on top of him so he can't move. And Laurie is so happy this is finally it. And then she slits his throat. But it's Michael Myers, so it's not quite that easy. So he's able to rip his hand, and cuts it clean up, and pulls it free from the knife, and somehow didn't sever every nerve in his hand, and is able to grab her throat and have the tightest grip imaginable. But then Allison shows up and breaks his arm, and then they take the knives and they start slitting his wrists and everything. It's they're just gonna bleed this dude clean. Eventually, he dies. Then the police show up, and Laurie and everyone decide we're going to tie Michael Myers to the top of our car, and we're gonna parade him around Haddonfield to show everybody that the monster, the boogeyman, is now dead. At which point, they take him to the junkyard where Corey worked, and they toss his ass into a grinder, and we just see him get crushed into a bunch of little pieces, and the blood splurt, and we see his head pop. That's kind of cool. And then it picks up sometime later. Allison decides to leave Haddonfield. Looks like Laurie and Officer Hawkins are finally going to get together, because these two were just so adorable in this movie. And finished. And as I sat there and I thought about it, I'm like, wow, this was awful. When I'm going into a Halloween movie with the promise of Michael Myers, I definitely expect to see way more Michael Myers. I mean, heck, the previous movie, Halloween Kills, which was fairly divisive among Halloween fans, it at least had Michael Myers doing Michael Myers things. I mean, this is a movie where Michael Myers almost felt like an afterthought. And to a degree, it kind of watched the last 15 minutes or so in this movie, which is definitely the best part of the movie, could have been chopped off from Halloween Kills, because the studio, of course, wanted a Halloween trilogy. And then they decided, we need to still fill in the rest of this movie, and just picked potentially some random script, which was a pseudo horror thriller love story thing. And we're we'll just work some things around, and there you go. Halloween ends. Because Michael Myers effectively had very little to do with this movie. I mean, Corey more or less was the main character. Like, in essence, if I had to compare this new Halloween trilogy to anything, I would almost say it does remind me, to a degree, the Star Wars sequel trilogy. You had that first Halloween movie, which was, maybe not quite as good as some of the previous installments, particularly the first one, but it was still good and, had a promising setup for a future. And it's a movie that I can and feel like I will revisit. And you have the second movie, Halloween Kills, which was still decently made, but more divisive with the fan base. And depending on how you look at it, could be or could not be considered a failure. And Halloween Ends, which is effectively like the Rise of Skywalker, where it just seems like it's this really crazy, like, mishmash of ideas and sort of cobbled together mess. A mess that's got some cool stuff in it, but at the same time, in the grand scheme of itself, just nothing really works. And so if someone to ask me, well, what is your preferred timeline? What is your preferred Halloween series or trilogy? I would say I like the Halloween, original Halloween 2, and Halloween H2O as the finale. You got Resurrection in that series, that doesn't count. And, okay. Yeah, that was a long-winded review of Halloween Ends. But I must now ask you, what did you think about Halloween Ends? What did you think about this entire Halloween trilogy? Did you like it? Did you not? Do you prefer another timeline? What is your preferred timeline of films? Please leave your comments in the comment section below. And if you like this video, I'd love it if you'd smash that like button, share it with some friends, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and ring that notification bell for more comic book content. And if you're wondering what to watch next, consider one of these two videos. Alright, take care, have a great day, and as always, stay geeky.